evening today. If you have anything that has to do with our environmental community, we invite you to let us know who you are when we hand you the mic. And we'll give you a whole minute to talk about whatever that is. And so get ready. How's that? This evening, our server is Eric, and also helping is Mike, I believe. Mike, right? No, sorry. Chris. I thought I heard Mike. Chris, I apologize. So we have two folks helping us tonight. And make sure that if you did order something, that you pay them up on the way out this evening. And our next time together, we always meet the first Wednesday of the month. So shortly after Groundhog Day will be February 4th when we'll be back here. And we believe we have an arborist coming to talk a little bit and update us on different practices. We're still working to confirm that. So come back and join us and get some more learning done. I think that's it for the moment. So Zach is going to introduce our speaker this evening. Thank you again for being here.
I get to take the easy introduction. So that man who needs no introductions, Mike Shipley, Conscious Cup. When I opened Duke's in Crystal Lake in 2008, he was already an established business for 2 years, but he had a similar philosophy right off the bat that I did, and he was one of the first purveyors that we started using because of his philosophy for eco-conscious coffee. And we wanted to make sure that we supported not only a local company but somebody who had similar ideals. And we've continued down that path forever, but we continue to serve his coffee here at Duke's Ale House and Kitchen ever since our inception. So we've been grateful to work with him, explore coffee in all sorts of flavors, and really we don't have a huge coffee program here, but we are very prideful in the coffee that we serve. So we're lucky to have him. So Mike has spoken at Green Drinks before. What year was that?
Well, I think the last time I did any talk was in 2015.
So yeah, quite some time ago. It feels like yesterday.
Good old days. Yeah.
So, but a lot has changed, I'm sure, as we all know, within the coffee industry and with the planet, So I'm excited to hear how things have changed and hear more about sustainability and coffee. I'll give it over to Mike.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Click this in here. Everybody can hear me okay? Thank you for that really great introduction. And, being a vendor for Zach and Dukes is something that we're very proud of. And it's funny because in 2008, when, Zach and I first talked about coffee here at Dukes, that was a really big deal for us. They're really probably among our first businesses that we were selling coffee to. And we had this little coffee roaster in Crystal Lake, and we were roasting coffee in the front window. And but we were mostly roasting it for the cafe, and we always had visions of growing and working with partners like Duke's Ale House, and we've been really fortunate to be able to continue down that path. So thank you for putting your trust in us all those years ago. And I mean it literally, like I was like trying to install brewers here and trying to figure all that out for the first or second time. It was a challenge, but grateful for that opportunity. So it's nice to see the environmental community here in Crystal Lake and McHenry County. There's a real strong support for the environment and for environmental stewardship, and that's something that we always cared about. And I know that Dukes cares about it. I know that the Defenders care about it. I know that Green Drinks care about it. And so I'm just happy to be here and be a part of it. And thank you for having me. I want to just kind of first, we opened in 2006, and in 2004, my dad, I would have just been graduating college, and my dad read an article in Smithsonian Magazine called "Can Great Coffee Save the Jungle?" And this was about sustainable coffee and practices in Brazil in particular. And it kind of identified some of the challenges with economic growth and the necessity for people in Brazil to create new farms, the challenges with deforestation surrounding that, and the opportunity for coffee to be grown within a harmony within its ecosystem. And so it was a very promising article. It was something that we really enjoyed the idea of, and it was the impetus for our business, which was really to bring socially and environmentally sustainable coffee to the suburbs of Chicago in a really kind of elevated but approachable coffee shop type of setting. And over the years, we've remained committed to that goal. We've since 2006, we've opened 5 cafes. So we have 5 cafes in total: Crystal Lake and Cary, Palatine, Barrington, and Libertyville. And we operate a cafe in Lincolnshire for a business in Lincolnshire. And we have a growing wholesale, online, and catering business. And so we do quite a bit in coffee. And our kind of primary focus in now and in the future is really to continue to grow our wholesale footprint and produce more and more coffee and work with producers around the world to kind of showcase these really amazing coffees. And so just if you're not familiar with specialty coffee, it's fair to think about wine. And specialty coffee industry has really mirrored wine in that where are these coffees coming from, the regions that they're coming from, the farms that they're coming from, the way that these coffees are processed. All of this affects the flavor. And as a roaster, our goal is to kind of not mess it up, but also apply a philosophy and a profile to those roasts to get the best out of that coffee. And we've just been in love with this idea, in love with the industry for a long time. And we just genuinely enjoy it. So during the course of this conversation, I think one topic that, I don't have slides for will be environmental stewardship as a business operator in our communities here. So if there's questions about composting, recycling, things that we do, things that we do within our stores, I want to kind of answer some of those questions, but there may be some time at the end of the presentation. Most of this presentation is really going to talk about origin and the coffee industry at large, and some of the challenges that we're having, and hopefully towards the end, maybe some optimism for the future. So I had mentioned that it's been since 2015 since I was here to do a talk. And so I kind of was thinking about, what we would talk about. And I thought we would go back to the good old days of 2015. If everybody can just bring your memory back to 2015. All right. So a lot has happened since 2015 if you haven't been paying attention to the news. But I did find something interesting, and that's, they have these words of the year. The Oxford Dictionary presents a word of the year. Webster's presents a word of the year. In 2015, Webster's word of the year was ism, environmentalism, or any other ism that we can add on to there, which makes sense for that era and that time. In 2015, the Oxford word of the year was a laughing, crying face emoji. And I think for me, I think of that and I'm like, I can't imagine that describing any period from 2015 to now. And so maybe it highlights some of our naivety, our optimism, and where we thought we were at in 2015 and the challenges that we were facing in the climate and environmental kind of spaces, and our opportunity to affect change. So we'll just stay in the moment and we'll go back to 2015. So 2015 became the warmest year ever recorded. 195 countries signed the Paris Agreement, creating legal guidelines and goals for limiting global warming. The U.S. sets national limits on carbon emissions, the U.S. Clean Power Plan, and the Keystone XL pipeline was rejected, which was a major accomplishment, be it a symbolic accomplishment. Shell abandons Arctic offshore drilling and markets ramp up their pursuit of sustainable energies. We really felt like we were on the cusp of a Green New movement. And for us, we felt like the last 10 years of our business, we've been, talking about these things. And we've been working with people like the environmental defenders and who care about this stuff. And we really felt like we had our moment and we were looking forward to it. So I hate to spoil it all, but things have not gone exactly as planned.
Yeah.
And so how are we doing in 2026? The 10 warmest years in the 174-year modern record have all occurred within the last decade, with this trend continuing in 2024, the current warmest year. 2025 is shaping up to be tied for second. The U.S. has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement, and though it remains intact, most countries are off track. The U.S. has dismantled the Clean Power Plan and undercut EPA authority, rolled back emission standards, and narrowed the scope of the Clean Water Act, among many other things, which you all are probably as informed or more informed than I am. And we question, have we passed our opportunity? Have we gone beyond that point of no return to really affect climate change in our planet? What about coffee? So some of the concerns and the things that we thought about in 2015 are the same as today. Global supply chains dependent on unstable regions. And that is geopolitical as well as environmental. There's a lot of examples in coffee of buying coffees from certain regions. The government will change the regulation around coffee, change how they're overseen from processing mills, sometimes take ownership of property in processing mills. And you can have those type of challenges when you're dealing with countries around the world. But also we have a lot of environmental challenges, which we'll talk about too. Climate change was acknowledged in 2015, but still largely framed as a future problem. And I think that we were really looking forward to addressing that. And it would have been nice to have had this conversation looking back at a different world if we had maybe done the things in 2015 that we had hoped for. Sustainability was gaining traction, but mostly through aspirational and intention, but not enforcement or scale. And this is an interesting conversation, I think, particularly in our industry. And I'd be happy to go down that rabbit hole as we kind of talk. But there's a lot of talk about environmental stewardship in coffee. There's a lot of talk about ethical sourcing in coffee. But we ask ourselves, what's the practical effect on the ground? And you can certainly go to a grocery store and you can buy branded coffee, which is going to allude to, these morals that we all share for environmental stewardship. But sometimes it's a gimmick and sometimes it's not what it is. And so this has been an ongoing kind of concern in our industry. And I think some of the critics are misguided, but there's also some truth to the fact that it's not enough to just say that you want to buy ethically sourced coffee. It's a little more difficult to kind of navigate and do it. Consumers were becoming more values driven, but systems lagged behind awareness. The fair trade movement was really a great way to kind of propel that forward. Is a good brand that was easy for people to understand. And definitely, especially in our early years, we really latched onto that idea. We purchased more and more fair trade certified coffees. We purchase less for fair trade certified coffees now than we did in 2015, but that's another conversation that we'll kind of talk about. Optimism that markets and awareness could fix the systemic problems. And I think this is maybe, in my mind, one of the biggest mistakes that we made is this belief that it would naturally resolve itself through markets. And we still have this belief. We still think, well, we'll solve it. We'll figure it out. And it's not always the case that happens. So I want to go through and I want to talk. I've got several points and I want to engage on this. And so if there's questions during any of these points, I would like to have a dialogue about it. It's easier for me to kind of talk through some of this and how it affects us and how it affects consumers and how it affects kind of the environment of coffee. So coffee prices versus coffee cost of production. So what you're looking at here is an up-to-date, as of today, the 10-year commodity price for coffee. It's important to know that coffee is the second largest traded commodity in the world behind crude oil. The commodity price for coffee affects the specialty market price. Commodity prices are dictated on a global exchange, and they have more to do with production volumes than anything else. This last year in 2023 and 2024, we suffered too much rain in Vietnam, and we suffered drought in Brazil. Those are the two largest coffee producing countries in the world. And when that combined, we had a dramatic rise in prices. And that rise happened around January, February of 2025. And so we saw almost 120% increase in pricing within a week's time. And so for us, this was challenged because we also had a policy of tariffs around that time too. So 2025 has been a very challenging year for coffee purchasing. When we were a smaller company, we could purchase 10 bags of coffee at a time, 15 bags of coffee at a time. There are coffees that we purchase in those increments. They're oftentimes single origin coffees that will sell as a specific coffee. They might have a unique processing method. They might be from a unique origin or a unique farm. They may have, very high quality flavors to them. And we'll present that, and we'll buy 10 or 15 bags. But many of the coffees that we're buying now, we're contracting between 200 and 300 bags a year. And so for us, when we're coming up on a contract of coffee and we're looking at pricing that jumped up 120% plus a 50% tariff, we don't have the time and the flexibility to wait for the 2 or 3 months before, the US decides not to tariff Brazil anymore. And so there were some very real challenges. I think for many companies and many importers, these were existential, but it made for coffee buying in 2025 exciting, to say the least. So we are hoping that we're starting to see a little bit of market stabilization now. There are no tariffs being applied to coffee in November. The coffee lobbying industry secured. Yeah, I know. They're out there. I'm not a part of it, but
Thank the Lord.
I know. So, but we still struggle with these prices. And one of the greatest challenges is as those prices increase, oftentimes it's futures markets, which are the speculation on futures markets, which is driving those prices. The value of the increased price does not make its way down to the farmer. So circling back to 2015, coffee was traded at about 120 to 130 per pound, already below the cost of production for many farmers. Today, Arabica futures trade roughly in the 340 to 380 per pound, and they were, as you can see in this graph, up above $4, which is a watershed mark for the industry. That was the thing. Talking to importers, talking to other roasters who are kind of buying at scale, the idea that coffee was above $4 a pound was just phenomenal. Now, this is the commodity price. We pay a different price. We could pay a farm gate price. So if we have a little more of a direct relationship with a grower or a producer, and we're buying through an importer, but we're kind of circumventing that importer's normal sales route. Like, it's not like we went on Cafe Import's website and saw what they have in the United States. We were in Costa Rica tasting coffee. We contracted the coffee. We can secure better pricing at a farm gate, and then the pricing from the importer tacks on top of that. Usually, our industry is $1 to $2 more per pound if you're thinking about that average. So the prices that I'm talking about are commodity prices, but commodity makes up the majority of the coffee grown in the world. And so one of the things that we really, really firmly believe is, though we love the high-end specialty coffee, we've got a photo in here, and I'll talk a little bit about Las Lajas in Costa Rica, whose producers we've been purchasing from for 13 years. We had the opportunity to meet them in Minneapolis with our importers. We have 2 employees going to Costa Rica on Sunday, and they'll meet with the producers this season as well. We've been buying their coffee for forever, and we love them. But they make up the top 1% of producers growing coffee in the world. They do not represent the coffee growing population at large. Most of the world's coffee is grown on small family farms in backyards. They're often growing multiple crops. They'll collect their coffee. They'll bring their coffee to a large processing mill, which is more of like a macro mill, that will pool all the coffee from the area, and they'll combine it, they'll grade it for quality, and then they'll produce it. Some of those mills are really low quality. There are large corporate farms which are doing mass quantity, low quality Robusta or low quality Arabica coffees. But that's all to say that the specialty market that we just know and love, our impact on the livelihoods of farmers is small because we exist in the niche side of the market. And so I think it's just a reality that we have to know when we talk about changing lives for producers. We're talking about regions. We're talking about communities and families. We're not talking about, having a mass effect on the commodity pricing of coffee. There are inequalities in the global marketplace for coffee that we can't overcome by buying really high-grade coffee from a farmer in Costa Rica. That being said, I'm going to go off on so many tangents. It's like we're only on slide one. Yeah. Kick me if I'm going way too slow. So, yeah, feel free to. So that being said, even among specialty coffee, not all the coffees that we buy are from Costa Rica, Las Lajas. We'll also buy Costa Rican coffees from specialty grade macro producers, which specialty grade coffee is 82 points or above, 80 points or above. We'll buy coffees anywhere from 84 points up to 92, 93, 94 points. 90 plus point coffees are exceedingly rare. And so a commercial grading of a coffee, if you see a commercial grade of a coffee at 95, 96, 97 points, the importer grade for that coffee is probably 3 or 4 points lower, but that doesn't diminish the quality of the coffee. I'm just giving you an impression that it's a sliding scale. So if you're buying a 93-point coffee, this is one of the best coffees grown in the world for the year. You're not getting much better than that. So most of our coffees are in this 85 to a handful above 90-point range. And we really value a lot of those 85, 86-point coffees because they can come from larger cooperatives and they can have a kind of a broader effect on communities. And they're a little more approachable in price. They're oftentimes fair trade certified. They can be organic certified at origin. That's where you'll see the cooperatives come in and earn those certifications, but it's not the end all be all. For most of the coffee producing world outside of that top tier specialty, they are struggling to make ends meet, and farmers are struggling to earn enough money to supply their harvest for the next year. Climate change really went from forecast to fact. I don't know. There's many industries where it's self-evident, but it is not up for debate when you're visiting and talking with farmers. These are practical challenges that they're having. They are recognizing that rainfall is more sporadic, or rainfall has increased, or the season has shifted in their region. They're seeing these fluctuations in temperature that they weren't seeing before. And so all of those things that we talked about in 2015 as risk factors, they're coming to fruition for farmers now, and you're starting to see a loss of farming land. So in 2015, climate change was discussed as a future threat to coffee. Today, it is visible through erratic rainfall, rising temperatures, and increased disease pressure. Arabica coffee, which is the coffee that we buy, of the two commercially cultivated species of coffee, Arabica and Robusta. Arabica is broadly considered the higher quality species of coffee. It has a denser molecular structure and more flavonoids, so it has an opportunity for more complexity, more clarity, just sweeter flavors. There are specialty grade Robustas, but they're exceedingly rare, and generally it just doesn't have that the flavor complexity and sweetness that you want out of an Arabica. Go on another tangent if we wanted to.
We're good.
Okay, sorry. So as a result of this, we're seeing a loss in suitable coffee land. Effectively, there's only so much mountain. And so as temperatures have risen, as rainfall has become more erratic, the existing coffee growing land is becoming unsuitable. And so producers are moving up the mountain. This poses tons of challenges: deforestation, soil degradation, but importantly, it increases the risk of coffee leaf rust, which is a fungus which decimates coffee plants, and the coffee borer beetle, which is a beetle which gets into those coffees and destroys those coffee cherries. And so just a simple infographic, you don't need to necessarily read it to get the idea that there's limited space for coffee growing regions to move into. Brazil, for example, largest coffee producing country in the world, as climate change affects some of the lower altitude specialty grade farms, they're looking for land higher up the mountain and in different regions, and that's just going to clear cut more forest. So there's all sorts of inherent challenges in that. Disease and pest pressure. In 2015, coffee leaf rust outbreaks, a devastating fungus, were considered episodic, with major outbreaks happening in South and Central America in a handful of years between 2010 and 2014. Warmer and more humid conditions now allow coffee leaf rust and the coffee berry borer to thrive in higher elevations previously considered safe. So disease pressure has become a permanent and escalating cost for producers. And I knew that I tried to do a little bit of research before we came up, but I knew that there may be some questions about what type of herbicides and pesticides are used and fertilizers are used in coffee. So maybe I can kind of touch on a little bit of that, towards the end of the conversation. It's, you'll probably all know, it's not exactly black and white. There's a lot of producers in the world that would not have coffee farms. Much of the coffee produced in Kenya wouldn't exist if it weren't for modern herbicides and pesticides. And so how they manage those, which ones are generally accepted, which ones are actually allowed under organic certifications, how they apply those is a whole interesting conversation in and of itself. Many times you will see producers who will fumigate the pathways and the roads around their crop to try to protect their crop and try to create zones of safety around their coffee so that they're not actually direct hitting their coffee. But it's a challenge. You're asking producers to meet environmental standards that the market really values, that we know are good for the earth. But at the end of the day, they have to put food on the table for their families. And so these are the real life kind of challenges that I think a lot of producers and a lot of producing countries face. So you see the leaf rust, and that's just what it looks like. It starts on the underside of the leaf, these little golden and then eventually brown spots, and then it just browns the leaves. The leaves die, and because the leaves die, the plant dies. The coffee borer beetle, I saved you the image of the actual beetle, but you can see what it does to the cherry on the inside. It just makes it into dust. It just kind of falls apart. So they bore into the tip of the cherry and they eat those seeds from the inside. Fun stuff so far, right? Sorry. All right. Anyway. In 2015, sustainable discussions focused on deforestation and water use. While these are still paramount problems, soil depletion, fertilizer dependency, water scarcity are limiting productivity as well. Environmental stressors now show up directly in cup quality and consistency. We can still get amazing coffees, and in a strange way, coffee has never been better than it is now. There's a lot of experimental processes. There's a lot more information sharing. We'll talk a little bit about that. So the quality at the best farms in the world continues to improve, but it doesn't change the kind of the broader impact on the industry at large and the challenges that a lot of these farmers and producers are having. I'll go back to the example of Las Lajas. Las Lajas grows some of their own coffee, but Las Lajas in Costa Rica buys from probably 36 farms around their region. If they were a macro mill, they might buy from 1,000 farms around their region. And if I can paint a little bit of a picture, if you imagine McHenry County, big farming community, if you drive down Route 14 to Woodstock, it's farm. You don't even see them. They just keep going. Then it's a subdivision, right? And then farm subdivision. But there's a lot of farmers and producers in McHenry County. And if it were a coffee growing region, there may be one, maybe two, probably one macro mill that produces a huge volume of coffee. And maybe they make up, in Central Valley at the Co-op Tarazu in Costa Rica, they make up 40% of Costa Rica's production. And they are responsible for building grocery stores and gas stations, and they're responsible for building schools they build schools for their farmers' children. They build schools for the migrant kids that come in from Venezuela to work the farms in Costa Rica during the harvest season. This is really one of those areas where I kind of mentioned before, this mid-80s point coffee. It's not the best coffee that comes out of Costa Rica, but you'll never hear us disparage another coffee. And those who think that the only coffee worth buying in Costa Rica is from Las Lajas have never met the good people at Co-op Tarazu and the impact that they have, or heard them talk about migrant kids coming into their communities and how important it is that they build schools for them. And so you're seeing challenges for farmers that contribute to Co-op Tarazu, who don't have big farms, who don't have the money to relocate their family, who are maybe growing on an acre or less, and maybe they have 3-4 dozen trees in addition to some avocados and some bananas, and they're just trying to make a life for themselves. It's those farmers that are having a challenge with the climate insecurities that we're experiencing. Las Lajas, the micro mill, well, they can just buy from another farmer up the mountain. They'll continue to seek out the best farmers in the area. And it makes a very challenging kind of situation for people, a challenging situation for a lot of these farmers who really are small plot farmers. Farmer income and poverty. I like this photo a lot. This is from Papua New Guinea. This is Kato Tapasi, which is a large cooperative that we purchased from. It is a fair trade certified cooperative. It's not the only coffee we buy from Papua New Guinea, but it's one that we have bought regularly. And they do really great work in their communities. But when you see the photos, I've not been there, but when we see the photos from our importer, it's families working the farms. It's just a very different lifestyle. And poverty in much of the coffee growing world is still a great challenge. And a lot of the farmers, and certainly a lot of the people who are handling and hand picking the coffees, don't make the type of money that they would need to sustain a living. And so I don't know where we begin. To be quite honest, we live in we're sometimes unaware of how fortunate we are in our part of the world, and how hard life can be for people around the world. Much of the specialty coffee industry, I think, prides itself on taking care of its pickers. I know the people that we talked to in Costa Rica last year, and some of the producers that I've met, we have a great relationship with a producer in Rwanda who has an unbelievable story in and of it themselves. But the people who grow their coffee love them. They brought income, they brought a viable source for income into the community, and it's made a real impact. But that's not the case. Again, we're talking about the specialty industry. That's not the case for the industry at large. So in 2015, roughly 44% of coffee farmers lived below the poverty line. Despite growth in specialty coffee and higher retail prices, farm level income gains, especially in commodity and macro specialty coffee, have been marginal and unsustainable. Climate volatility frequently wipes out progress before it can compound. Certifications and their limits. This is another really interesting topic of conversation. So in 2015, certifications were promoted as primary sustainability solutions. Certification premiums today often average only 5 cents to 10 cents per pound. So that the viable economic difference between certified and non-certified coffees for our part has almost entirely vanished. And so when we're buying coffee, it's still very important for us to know that it's traceable to the origin, to the mill, to the farm if possible. It's really important to know that it's high quality, that they're using sustainable practices in regions when they're able to. They're growing under canopies of trees and they're doing the things that we all like to value. But the certifications have kind of shown to have their limits in coffee. And I had mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that we actually purchase less fair trade certified coffees than we did in 2006 when we first opened. And that's a reflection of both the availability and the quality of those fair trade certified coffees. And so we still tend to buy a lot of FTO from Colombia, fair trade organic from Colombia, from Mexico, from Papua New Guinea. But in the old days, we used to buy fair trade organic from Ethiopia. Well, it no longer exists in Ethiopia. They've regulated it out, so it's just not there. And that's not necessarily to say, and I would never promise that this is true, but it's not always the case that the environmental incentives at origin have changed. People are still interested in producing with environmental stewardship. A lot of these producers really genuinely care about their land. They also know that if they can produce higher quality coffees, that they can earn higher income for that coffee. So there is some built-in incentive, which I would mark as a very good thing for coffee. It happens that the best coffees grown in the world that taste the absolute best are grown within some measure of their ecosystem. The soil is taken care of, proper pruning, and proper methods to protect against infestation of the rust and any coffee borer beetles and any other problems that they might have. So it is also to say that I think the market has shifted a little bit, where you're not seeing people seeking out fair trade, seeking out organic, like they used to. I feel like we field less and less of those questions. And I would hate to believe that they care less about it. They might just feel like it's not the most important thing anymore. And maybe it is in part because roasters like myself are saying to them, yes, I know that I know that Las Lajas is not fair trade certified, but I assure you, we're paying a premium for this coffee. It's from good farmers and producers, and it is. All of those things are equally true, but it is taking a market share away from that certification. There's also challenges with certification being manipulated. And I don't know if you call this manipulation or not, but a really easy example is women-owned cooperatives. So we can purchase coffee from cooperatives that represent a majority share women-owned. And there's certain countries where that can really matter. Women-owned cooperatives that we were purchasing from in Rwanda, Bakonzo Organic was right on the border between Uganda and the DR Congo. And it has a really violent history. And there's a reason why the majority of the property and the farms are owned by women. It's because the men are not there anymore. And so, and some of it is violence kind of infiltrating the area. Some of it is them leaving, seeking out other opportunities. But there's a benefit to that. And that can earn a premium with that labeling. Like we know that that's marketable. But we'll also buy from large macro cooperatives who will separate out lots from their female producers and not determined on quality, increase the price of that lot and label it a women-owned cooperative. Is that right or wrong? I don't know. This is and I'm really not posing a guess. I'm just telling you that's one of the things that will happen. And one of the conversations that is happening in industry is there has been a movement to adopt ethical standards in the application of grading scores. And this has been a major conversation in the industry. Old timers are like, no, don't do that. We need to incentivize people for quality. We need to grade the coffee on the taste of the coffee alone. And we know that oftentimes the best quality coffees come from the best producers. So it's going to naturally get the result that we want. Whereas proponents of the measure are saying, but we haven't seen the type of seismic change that we need in the industry. Producers are still struggling, and we need to incentivize grading scores based on ethical grounds as well. And so there's a lot of kind of back and forth on that. So certification is just not, it's just a little, muddier, it's a little more of a gray area now. We definitely have fair trade certified coffees. We definitely support it. We have other certified coffees. But it's not the end all be all. And I think we've learned over the last 10 years that it maybe isn't the savior of the industry that we had hoped. Nobody's got any questions yet? Anybody want to throw a question up? Yeah.
So when you look at the different groups inside Costa Rica and all the areas, how do you grade their coffee? So
Right.
What's the process to say, hey, I want to go with this distributor versus this distributor?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Much of the coffees that we purchase are graded at origin by both the producers or organizations in the country. The Coffee Institute of Costa Rica tastes and grades every single coffee that is exported out of their country, legally at least. And so there's a grading score that we can get from origin, but more importantly, our importers will cup and grade those coffees. There's two kind of tiers for grading. The first tier is, maybe there's three. One is called green grading. So before the coffee's even been roasted, green coffee is harvested, processed coffee, ready for roasting. It looks green. They're called green beans. They're not beans. They don't grow in a pod. They're a cherry. It's what we call them. You can grade those out for defects. So if you get a certain set sample of that, and a green grader is going to show 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 defects, it's not specialty. It's not going to meet that 80 point. It's going to go into the commodity grade pile. Now, once you've graded out the commodity grade and you're grading for specialty, then you're going to have cupping scores. And cupping is tasting and evaluating coffee. I can pull up an image here towards the end of it. I don't think I have one in the slide. But effectively what you do is you have a whole table full of coffees. You have small samples. You have a little spoon. We do this about every other month. We have a free cupping and tour on Saturdays at the warehouse. So if you sign up for our newsletter, you can sign up for that and come out and do a tasting with us. But cuppers will taste an entire table of coffees. Typically, they'll taste 5 samples of the exact same coffee to determine if it's consistent, and they'll determine if it's defects, and they'll grade that coffee. And if it's 81 points, okay. If it's 82, okay. If it starts to get into the 84, 85, 86, we know that coffee roasters like us will be interested in it. If it gets 86 plus, we're looking at a washed coffee from Ethiopia that my importer is grading at 86 points. If he's grading at 86 points, if we sent that to Coffee Review, which is a commercial grader, it's like a wine spector grader, it would probably be a 91 or even a 92 point coffee. So there's a little bit of that fungible grade in there, but we really count on trustworthy expert coffee importers. The people on their staff that do that professionally are called Q graders, quality grading. Q graders grade specialty coffee. They go through a whole process. They have to meet certain standards. They earn a certification. They have to keep that certification up to date. Does that kind of answer the question? So now when I'm looking at a coffee, what we'll do is we will talk to our importer. There are times where we have a relationship and we know we've bought the coffee for many years in a row. We'll say, send us samples. As long as it samples out right, we're good to go. There are other times where we may try 6, 7, or 8 different coffees from El Salvador to find the one that we really like. And then it becomes, we're doing the cupping at our table. We're bringing in samples. We do a small sample roast of it. We'll taste out that coffee. Any other questions? Yeah.
Talking about early on about the rainforest and coffee and how one can help the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that creating a cover for the trees for many of these varietals will help the sustained growth of the tree. It certainly is good for the soil and the retention of minerals in the soil to have, some measure of canopy when you can. And I think a lot of farms will practice clear cutting to their detriment, and it will dry out their trees and decrease their full yield. And so the farmers who have an opportunity to kind of intersperse different product, and avocado is a very popular, a banana can be a very popular. You'll see a lot of countries where these products are not indigenous to, that growers will grow them within their coffee farms to create some biodiversity and hopefully create a little bit of a canopy in some areas for their coffees. It depends a little bit on the varietal of coffee. So I mentioned the 2 commercially cultivated species of coffee. Below those species, there's 1,000 varietals of coffee. Coffee is indigenous to Ethiopia. It's a wild growing cherry tree. Has anybody heard of Kaldi, the goat herder? The goat herder. Kaldi was a goat herder in Ethiopia in the 1300s, and he was not very good at his job. He would always lose his goats, and he'd have to go find his goats, and he'd always get into trouble. And back then in the 13th century, if you're a goat herder and you're losing your goats, not good, not good. Kaldi knew this. So he loses his goats and he can't find them. And he's looking, he's about to give up. And he comes down and he sees down at the bottom of a slope along a river embankment, there's some trees and there's what looks like his goats, but they're standing on their hind legs. And what are they doing? Are they dancing? And he's like, the goats are dancing. And so he goes down a little closer and he's a young guy. So he's a little experimental, and he's like, what are these goats doing? And they're popping these cherries into their mouth, and they're eating the cherries, and they're dancing. And so Kaldi joins the goats, and he's eating the cherries, and he's dancing around in the moonlight. And then eventually a holy man comes by, and like all good and proper holy man, he says, time out, give me these cherries. You go home with your goats, I will take them, and we'll discover what's behind the magic. And so that's the fairy tale of coffee's origin. There's probably 100 Caldi's coffee shops in America, and or Dancing Goats coffee shops. But it's funny because the imagery would have been goats jumping up to the bush to snag cherries, and so maybe there is some tale that came of that. The truth is coffee is indigenous to Ethiopia. It would have been a wild growing cherry tree that would have been known to like the Oromaya zone, the Oromaya tribes in that region. There's evidence that they would take cherries and they would dry them with animal fat as like kind of a primitive energy bar and take them with them. And then eventually over time in Ethiopia, natural coffee production emerged where you started. The history of food science is really interesting. I mean, we're always messing around with stuff. We didn't have iPhones back then. So people are like, what should we do? Let's grab these cherries. Let's dry them out. Let's grind them up. Let's roast them. Why not? We'll roast them, we'll grind them, and we'll throw them in water and see what happens. And so they were doing that with a lot of things, teas, leaves, a lot of liquids would, infuse products into. So eventually there became a coffee, a ceremonial way to produce coffee in Ethiopia, where you would essentially roast over a fire, grind the coffee, and then serve it in a cup with hot water. Similar to the Turkish method. The Turkish method is a little different because it uses a large bowl of sand that's heated up, and then I forget the device offhand, but it has kind of a long stem and a little bowl at the end, and they would move it around, and it's got your coffee and water, and it brings it up to a boil. You use a very fine grind of coffee, and then you serve it in a cup, and then at the bottom of the cup, the grounds will tell your future. So kind of an interesting history of coffee is super interesting as well. It was the Ottomans and the Turks, the Ottoman Empire that began the spread of coffee. Istanbul was famous for their coffee houses, and they would have been like coffee houses today. They had this natural rift with, there's historical records of sultans who wanted to ban coffee. And because, they're popping up these coffee houses and this pre-Renaissance rise of the merchant class is happening. And so these coffee houses, they have influence, and they're popping them up in religious districts and business districts. And, people are coming together. And, if you're trying to run a 14th century religious autocracy, you need people on your team. And if you've got these coffee shops out there, so it's interesting dynamic in history. We could keep talking history, but we don't need to.
8 more minutes and then questions.
Okay, cool. We're good. So labor in the next generation, and this is a really interesting topic too, because by and large, you're seeing an exodus of young people from coffee, and that poses challenges as people, they're naturally restless. They want to go into the cities. They want to pursue other opportunities, but it is sheds a light into the sustainability of the industry. On the other hand, there are farms that are producing really, really high quality coffee where this is actually a bright spot. And you have young people who are coming back to the farms because they're connected now, and they know what they're doing in Brazil, and they know what they're doing in El Salvador, and they tasted this coffee from Ethiopia, and they had a natural processed coffee, and now they want to bring that back to their country of origin. So there's a lot more information sharing. So it's a little bit of like, a K market, where at the top of the market, the best coffee producers in the world, you're starting to see an interest among the young people because they see the opportunity in really high grade specialty coffee. But for the rest of the coffee growing industry, it continues to be a very big challenge. We talked to some people in Ethiopia, and I know that some of our other partners have expressed young people coming back wanting to change everything. And it's kind of like you appreciate that dynamic of the old guy is like, we do it this way. And the young person's like, but you don't even know about anaerobic processing. Like, do you guys know about anaerobic processing? It's really cool. It's like, I'll just go there. Market concentration and imbalance. So in 2015, the top 5 companies controlled roughly 40% of global coffee sales. That concentration has increased, leaving farmers with minimal pricing power while absorbing most production risk. Climate change amplifies this imbalance rather than correcting it. So same problem that we have in a lot of the agro industry, where you're seeing smaller, mid-sized producers, and especially in coffee, smaller and mid-sized commodity grade or low specialty grade coffee producers are getting squeezed out. where again, that top percentage of coffee we will still find great coffees out there in the world, and they'll be great for their communities and great for their families. But those opportunities they're not growing for a lot of producers because they're losing land, they're losing property, and they're competing against large food conglomerates who are less interested in quality and community and more interested in market share and price point. So number 10, sustainability as a risk management. And this is, I think, this photo is really nice photo. You can see the coffee in the basket is being sorted out for lower grade. This is a very high grade farm. And this is on a drying table. This is a natural processed coffee. So they're going to harvest the coffee. They're going to put it out to dry, full cherry. That's going to wither and dry in the sun. And then they will pulp and they'll process off the rest of that. So you have just the green bean. When it sits in the cherry for that long, you're talking a 2 or 3 week process now, you absorb the sugars and the fruit tone from the cherry. So naturally processed coffee is oftentimes very vibrant and very fruity. So this is a really interesting photo. You can see a really high grade farm separating out that low grade coffee. But to the point of the slide, it's just a nice photo. That's why I put it on there. To the point of the slide, in 2015, sustainability was framed primarily as an ethical choice. Today, it is increasingly understood as risk management for supply continuity. Without sustained investment in farmer income and climate resilience, coffee becomes scarcer and more expensive. Coffee roasters like Conscious Cup must work harder than ever to share coffee's story and highlight the amazing work of producers around the world. I think that this highlights also another kind of buzzword that is maybe not what we want, but people talk about, adapting to climate change, climate resilience. And in the coffee industry, you've seen a shift in the conversation from some of that 2015 optimism about we can change the world to these are the cards that were dealt. And these producers are trying to work in a world that they see as getting progressively warmer and progressively more unstable for their product and for their farms. And so that idea of climate resilience rather than affecting real change is maybe a sad reality for a lot of the coffee industry right now.
Coffee
Yeah.
consumption, is that going up or down?
Coffee consumption continues to increase. I haven't probably looked at industry trends in the United States like in a hard way, but we continue to see an increase. And daytime restaurant traffic and restaurant business is continuing to grow. You're seeing more and more breakfast restaurants and more cafes. I think you see it just even in our communities here. And we've spent a long time, I think, being among the only specialty coffee roasters outside of Chicago. And that's just nowhere near the case now. You're seeing more and more and more of it. People are, my opinion, we have every culture around the world has traditions centered around food and drinks. Coffee is common among many cultures. Tea is common among many cultures. But there's a lot of different drinks, mate, matcha. It's what we do. And so I think that people will continue to purchase coffee. There's newer and newer evidence of health benefits for coffee. And I think that there's a place for the coffee shop as there is a place for the restaurant in our world as community spaces. So coffee has continued to grow in the West and coffee consumption continues to grow. And even in our areas, like I said, anecdotally, I think you can see it. Crystal Lake has like 24 coffee shops now. So that's about my presentation. I do have one kind of optimistic point here at the end. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I think like we have to be real about the problem. You all know this. We have to be real about the problem before we can ever hope to solve anything. So climate resilience is improving. So research into climate resilient hybrids, shade system, and soil health is producing measurable yield sustainability in pilot regions. Adaptation is happening faster now because the threat is no longer theoretical. You are seeing the institutes of coffee within these countries working very hard to improve the knowledge of their producers and improve their practices to try to overcome some of the threats that are coming their way. Better science is reaching the farms, open access education platforms, YouTube. I mean, as silly as it sounds, like the ability for producers now to connect globally. You know, when we opened in 2006, I remember I used to say this when we talked about buying sustainable coffees. We would be buying from an importer or we'd be buying from a fair trade cooperative, and you would avoid the wolves. The wolves are the brokers. The wolves are the brokers that go out to a farm and they say, I'm going to give you this. That's all you can get. That farmer they're not connected to the going commodity rate of coffee. They have no idea if it's a fair deal or not. They'll put them into debt. You know, they'll manipulate to get that coffee, and they're known for it. And the term for these brokers was wolves. And, but that's changed because producers are more aware of the industry. Their children, they've been coming up. You know, you've got, you know, millennial adults, kids who are taking over farms, that they're interconnected and they're applying that knowledge and that science back into their farm. Excuse me. Thank you. Market awareness has matured. And, you know, I feel like the slide about certifications maybe felt messy. It feels messy for a reason. It's unclear, you know, like certifications are really good and they're driving forces, but I think that we viewed them as opportunities for seismic change in the industry, and it just never materialized in that way. And now more and more than ever, if you're just talking honestly among coffee roasters, most of us begrudgingly admit that the best coffees grown in the world are not fair trade certified coffees. You know, they're ethically sourced, you know, but they don't have that stamp on them. And so as the market's matured, you know, hopefully people are realizing that, you know, the sustainability practices benefit their investment, you know, if they're invested in coffee, if they're invested in these markets, but they also improve the quality. And so as the market matures, I think people are going to continue to seek out ethically sourced coffees, but they're going to start to make assumptions based on like the roaster. You know, you're a local, if you say you're a specialty coffee roaster, you should be producing specialty coffee. Collaboration is stronger than in 2025, 2015. Producers, importers, roasters, and researchers are working together more openly than a decade ago. That cooperation is essential, and it's finally becoming normal. And I think we see this in countries around the world. There's a lot of travel between countries. Later this year, we'll be in El Salvador for the Coffee Producer and Roasters Forum. This is a great opportunity for, you know, new roasters will go down and they can do coffee visits and visit farms and stuff like that. You know, we can go down, we can do that same thing. We can buy coffee from producers in El Salvador, and then we get together for a 3-day conference with the world's roasters and producers. And it's squarely geared in coffee producing countries, you know, and it's forcing roasters from the West to go to them. And so I think that the depth of the collaboration with the kind of the technology that is at our fingertips nowadays is benefiting. And so, you know, I think there is room to be optimistic. I think that personally, I think that we react, you know, to the decade. And so hopefully there's a counterbalance in the decade to come, and people get back to caring in a way that maybe we felt like people cared in 2015. So. Thanks. Zach?
I guess the most sustainable way for consumers.
So Zach asked, what's the most sustainable way for a consumer to drink coffee? So, you know, this is an area we didn't talk about, like, what is the coffee shop doing to be good environmental stewards in our small little ecosystem, and, you know, recycling and composting and all of that stuff is really good. I think that, you know, these are the things that we care about. If you can find a specialty roaster that has compostable packaging is nice. If you're buying from a local specialty coffee roaster, you want to see that they're communicating where their coffees are coming from. So if you're buying from us, or, any of the other kind of smaller micro roasters in the area, we're all communicating origin. Like every one of us talks about where the region is. We're going to talk about where the farm is or the mill. And then the farm is the final layer. It's not always the case that you know where the farm is. Sometimes it's 20 farmers from a region. Sometimes it's a specific farm. When we buy from Las Lajas, we buy from a lot of our, best producers. It's a specific farm. We know we're buying from La Sabanilla this year, So looking for that information, that kind of granular information on the coffee, I think is a really good sign to what this roaster is buying. If you're not seeing that information, if it's just a dark roast label, there's no origins, or if it's like a brand concept, like I don't think there's a Firehouse Coffee in the area anymore, so I'm not going to pick on anybody, but you know what I mean? Like if it's like there's no origin specifics and it's like we're gun coffee. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of companies out there that are just putting their marketing forward, and there are local companies that are opening up that if you go onto their website, there's not a word about where their coffee's coming from, about what's involved in any of their blends. There's no comment about processing. All of that stuff is what makes specialty coffee so incredibly interesting. And it also is what I think denotes and shares the value behind it. So I think that's one of the biggest things. If you're just at a grocery store, look for the label that has more detail. And if you can't find anything like that, then in that case, get the fair trade certified coffee, because then at least you know that you're meeting some sort of minimum expectations for environmental stewardship and ethics. We brew Chemex at home. We use paper filters, so our waste is minimal. I would avoid K-cups. You can certainly get a K-cup machine and get reusable K-cups. Those are nice. Yeah, does that kind of answer the question? Cool.
Oh, question. Sorry, Aaron.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite coffee variety?
I am very partial to natural Ethiopian coffees.
That's my favorite.
So they're oftentimes the most flavorful, but there's a lot of really great coffees out there. So I think our celebration blend this year, it's a holiday iteration. Every year it changes a little bit. All of these blends change a little bit, but like our espresso blend and we have a handful of core house blends. We work really hard to try to keep them consistent. So when we're buying the next 200, 300, lot of coffee, we want it to match the flavor profile from before, and a lot of thought that goes into that. With our holiday blend, our celebration blend, we'll change it up because it's a seasonal blend. It's a micro lot blend. So I really enjoyed that. And that's a blend of 3 different natural processes. What's that? What's the holiday hangover? That's a very popular blend. Yeah. Yeah. That one is tried and true. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. Yeah. That's a popular
blend.
blend.
In thanking Mike.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. Okay.
Absolutely. So this is that time where we're going to try and get you connected back into the community with 1-minute rounds of announcements. I'm going to steal back the mic from my friend Mike. There we go. And want to remind you that we have Zoomers on as well. So that's why we want to make sure you're speaking into the mic, and welcome everybody. I forgot to greet you too. Okay. So does anybody have an announcement yet? Oh,
I know it's early in the year.
Back there. That's okay. I'll start with Kim back there. And you don't have to have it.
Everybody, wow, how lucky are we to have anyway, I have 2 quick things tonight. The McHenry County chapter of the National Organization for Women, McHenry County Now, is hosting their 3rd annual celebration honoring Martin Luther King, or Dr. Martin Luther King, on Friday, January 16th at the college in the auditorium from 6 to 8. If you've been to their events, you know they're really, really wonderful. They have Dr. Norval Brown's coming back, and he's amazing. He's fun, and he's interesting, and he's hilarious. And they're going to show a short film, and it'll be a nice evening. So there's flyers about that on the back table. The second thing is the Great Seed, now known as the Great Seed and Soil event, which is being put on by the Center for Agrarian Learning and an amazing group of people that are helping with that. That is Friday, February 7th. I'm sorry, not Friday. It is Saturday, February 7th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, at the college, it's free. Just show up, and they have a bunch of presentations this year. They've got a pocket prairie run, excuse me, urban agroforestry, and composting at home. And so if you're a little bit seed challenged like me, it's a lot of fun to go and ask a lot of questions because all the right people are there. So this is back there too. So thanks very much.
And that's a great event. So if you have time to go, make sure you go. It's free.
Sue,
Yes. Seeds are free. Yes, it is an amazing event.
It's good for them.
You can scold me afterwards if I do something that's inappropriate, but just on a more personal level, we are currently renovating a small 2-bedroom house on 1 acre of oak woodland. And if you know someone or interested in renting a house on the east side of Crystal Lake, contact me later. And then I'm just gonna throw this one out there too. If there's anyone here who knows of a part-time opportunity for a worthy young person on the autism spectrum, high functioning, let me know. Contact me later. Thank you.
You got it.
No.
Yeah.
no, he stretches it.
Well, if you have some spare time and need to shop and get some food, I know that our food co-op would appreciate customers. So
Thank
take
you.
some time to zip up Route 14 and take a look around and buy something good for yourself.
Including
or a family
coffee.
member. And
Including
coffee.
coffee.
Conscious coffee is there.
In bulk too, you can get the whole.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
In
In
paper
paper
bags.
bags,
that's
that's right. And I know we have a lot of co-op members here too, so spread the word. We appreciate that.
Thanks, Leslie.
Did I miss anybody? Then oh, yes.
Oh, okay, I'm not sure this is
Hope,
appropriate.
hope,
but-
hope, hold on.
What the heck?
As long as it's,
So there's this awesome woman named Karen Battaglia. She's a nurse. She's running for state senate in 30 seconds. And she's having
We have to
a-
cut you off there. We
Sorry.
can't support
so
individual.
pay attention to when the primaries are coming. Make sure you are registered to vote for the primaries and then the general election in the fall. We are supposed to be apolitical, so that's why. You can.
That seems like a loaded question.
She'll be ready to grab it from you if it's wrong.
You're not gonna throw it. Make sure that you, if you're sending in a ballot, you get it postmarked.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can bring it in, you can lock it in, doesn't matter what. But get it postmarked so it counts.
That was a good one.
Yes.
Very good. All right, so keep paying attention
Aaron's got
to
another
the news. Here we go, Aaron.
Hey, everybody. It's nice to see some new faces. I'm Erin with the Environmental Defenders. Just wanted to welcome anybody that's here for the first time. If you're interested, you can watch previous green drinks on our YouTube channel to kind of get an idea of the different programs that we offer. They're always available probably a few weeks after the session. And we post out to our listserv. Another good point, if you are not on our green drinks email list, get in touch with myself or Grace over here, the Defenders Communication and Membership
Or
Specialist.
sign up at the back.
Or you can sign up in the back. We'd love to have you join. We are kicking off our 55th year as an organization. And we're really doing a big push on membership this year. So we would love to have all you guys become members of the Defenders. If you are members and you're not sure if your membership has lapsed, I'll reach out to Grace or myself and we can get you back on our membership. So thank you guys.
There you go. All right. That almost seems like a wrap. So we'll be back here on February 4th. Get ready to learn more about trees and other good things like that. We're here every first Wednesday. We are grateful again to our speaker, Mike, for coming this evening, telling us about coffee. How many of you are coffee drinkers anyway, right? Yeah, so this is a really important topic. and More to learn
We got
about.
matcha too.
That's
Matcha
right.
coffee.
Yeah. And as we keep going forward in this new year of 2026, we hope you'll continue to join us, find ways to get connected, stay connected. We have a really strong environmental community here. It's important to support each other, take care of this beautiful world and everyone we share this beautiful world with, and be hopeful. And we will see you next time. Best wishes for the new year from all of us. Thanks for coming.